On location from a different location. And not one, but two glasses behind me here. I think we have a special guest as well. Something a little different for today. Let's drink some whiskey. So you may recall at the kind of beginning of the series of videos that I started doing way back last November that I did a particular single malt Irish whiskey that was a special release. You might also be noticing that there are two glasses on the table along with a brand new release from a different location, not Christy's. Nothing against Christy's, just decided to take it on the road today. This is the brand new release from Fercullen Irish Whiskey, the 20-year-old 5 elements single malt Irish whiskey. Welcome to Whiskey and Whiskey. I'm the Whiskey Chaser Brian, and we're coming to you from a different location today, from the wonderful and amazing Powerscourt Distillery here in Wicklow, Enniskerry's, I believe, on the estate of Powerscourt. And as I said at the start, not one, but two glasses. And let me introduce to you my guest today, Irish whiskey legend, I believe in these parts.
Wow.
Well known.
Big words.
Big words. I've done my research. Mr. John Cashman.
Hey, pleasure to be here and welcome to Powerscourt.
It's a great, it was great to get the invite and to come up and see what the crack was and get a little bit of a distillery visit. And
yeah,
I see a lovely little whiskey here in front of me.
Yeah, we're kind of happy with this one. This has been our latest release. We just brought it out in the past few weeks. We launched Taste of Dublin back in September, which was the first sort of big consumer event in Ireland in a year and a half. So it was great to be able to get there, launch this whiskey, see people's reaction to it, because you can have the best liquid in the world, you can have some brilliant marketing, but until you actually get in front of somebody, you don't really know how they're going to react to you, and you can learn from that as well. And we certainly did learn from that first night and just talking with different consumers about the whiskey. But it's great to be able to have this, and of course it is a follow-on from the brand that you sampled last year, the Fercullen 18-year-old 5 elements. So this was just natural progression for us for this year. So delighted to be able to introduce you to it, because I believe you haven't tried it yet.
No, I haven't. I did have as I said already, the 18-year-old 5 elements on the channel, and I will leave a link to that either above or down below, and you can check it out in your own time. But I was a huge fan of it at the time. I remember trying it, and I actually put a few people onto it. I said, this is absolutely, and it was. I'm not blowing smoke or anything like that. You know, truth be told, if it wasn't great, I would tell you.
Yeah, but we'd hope to hear that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, transparency and all that aside, like I really enjoyed it. So when I saw this coming down the road, and I was actually following your Instagram account, and it was where I had seen that you're doing the Taste of Dublin.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, okay, new whiskey alert.
Yeah. No, it was. I suppose the background to this, and something I've been talking with Noel quite a lot, Noel Sweeney, of course, our master distiller, was he came up with this idea a number of years ago, back in the days of when he was working with Cooley. He started working on a project with Dr. Barry Walsh, who was the famed blender for Irish distillers for many a year. He sadly passed away a few years ago. And they were looking to do different cask finishes. And they were trying different things like port and Madeira and sherry and bourbon. And Dr. Walsh just said to Noel once, he says, why don't you put them all together? And Noel went, actually never quite thought of that, and started doing that, and some brands came out of that. And then when he joined Powerscourt back in 2016, when he started like building this distillery, as you see here, he also started sourcing different barrels and different casks. Of course, Powerscourt as a company, we're fortunate enough to be able to get some of the aged whiskey that Noel had previously made in Cooley Distillery. And hence, one of the questions we're always asked is, you've only been distilling for 3 years, but you have a 20-year-old whiskey.
Yeah.
So, and we're very open, it is not whiskey that was made here, but it was made by our master distiller elsewhere. And that's why on a bottle, we're allowed to put his name and master distiller beside it, because he actually did make it.
And it makes sense.
And it's just progression. So he sourced this liquid and then sourced different barrels and decided to start doing different finishes.
Okay.
And was just, always playing around with them, assessing them, seeing how they're progressing. And then eventually the idea of 5 elements came out of that, and the first 5 elements with 18-year-old liquid. So with the good response that we got for that in the past year, he had other barrels as well maturing, and just decided, let's do a second edition of this 5 elements and try to change it slightly and use different types of casks.
Okay.
So this
isn't, we'd say, the 18-year-old 5 elements just matured for an extra period of time.
This is an entire new liquid.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
And that was one of the things with the different casks that he had sourced. He has a large number of different flavors, and basically like a different, I suppose, like in painting, a different palette of colors for painting. Mm-hmm. But in whiskey making, he has a different palette of casks that he can then bring together and pull from in order to make that one masterpiece. Be it a painter making a masterpiece or a whiskey maker making a masterpiece. And I don't say that lightly, but you can say it when you have someone like Noel Sweeney who is behind it, somebody with over 30 years experience of working in the industry, someone who I've known personally and professionally for 15 years and working with him and being on different panels, judging panels, IWSC and things like that, as two of the only Irish judges for the International Wine and Spirits competition. So I've known him very, very well, and I know what he likes and the flavours that he's always looking for. And I think this one really brought it up another level, because when you have 5 different flavour profiles and 5 different casks that you want to bring together, you often fail in so much as some people will go, they'll just say, okay, let's get these 5 casks, get the same amount, put them all together, see what we have.
Okay.
You're not going to get the nuances from that. You need to be able to pick the flavour that you want and have it in the right ratio in that ultimate end product.
Okay.
So Noel had these 5 casks that he wanted to work with, or five finishes. It was Moscatel, it was Marsala, it was Pedro Jimenez, it was Oloroso, and then he wanted all of that with the bourbon. Now he always says he starts with the bourbon, so he'll start off with this 20-year-old, fully matured.
That's his blank canvas.
That's the canvas.
As artistic,
and then he will add the different flavors into that. Come and go until he's happy with something. So one of the things that I think is amazing about this whiskey is the fact that all those 5 elements are evident. You can actually pick them all up. You can taste them. And in a lot of cases, and in my experience, in my over 20 odd years working in the whiskey industry, I often find PX being Pedro Jimenez is one of the most difficult ones to work with, because it can really take over. It can mask other flavors very, very quickly. It's just by the nature of it.
Yeah, you were having a conversation off camera while we were getting things set up about a particular Pedro Jimenez finished whiskey and how difficult it was to work with.
Yes, absolutely.
And those that wouldn't actually know that, it's a good thing to know moving forward.
Yeah.
You might taste a PX flavored whiskey, or finished, I use flavored finished whiskey, and not really understand how difficult it can be to get that spot on.
It is.
And when they do nail it.
Yeah, when they nail it, it's really, really good, because I've often said that, call me old fashioned, I'm a whiskey drinker, I like my whiskey to taste of whiskey. So I don't particularly like a finish to overtake the flavour of the whiskey itself. And any of the bad whiskies I've tasted in my life, and again, that's not a term I use lightly, but the one thing they have in common is generally, it's not that the spirit itself has been bad, it's more so that the finish or whatever flavour they were trying to achieve has just overtaken the core liquid. For me, that's if I want to drink something that tastes like so much like PX, I'm going to go into Celtic Whisky Shop or Wine Centre in Kilkenny or wherever and buy a bottle of PX.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If you wanted to try it that bad, it's the same with most people.
Exactly. So,
do you think then, from a standpoint, then that actually brings a question that's not really relevant to the video, but still, that some would use the overdewing of a finish in a cask to cover up a few mistakes?
I'm sure that happens.
Okay.
It is an easy way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, the art of blending is, again, in my experience when I'm in a warehouse or I've been working with Noel or working with other blenders, I mean, over my career I've worked with, John Campbell of Lefroy or David Turner in Bowmore or Fred Noah, Jim Beam or Shinji Fukuyo of Yamasaki. I've worked with all of these like absolute legends of the whiskey industry. And, a lot of times when we're working together and we're sampling different products, we're not exactly looking for what's right, we're looking for what's wrong and what we can do to get rid of that.
Okay.
And
it's an interesting aspect of coming from that side of things.
And blend it out because we're trying to pick up, okay, that's not what we're looking for here.
Right.
We're looking for something different. I suppose the easiest way of masking it is hiding it. Yeah, okay. That is the easiest way because you're not going to throw it down a drain.
No. It's at the end of the day, you still have to sell it.
Yes. So I'm sure it is something that has happened, certainly in any of the brands that I've worked for and worked with. We've never done that, but I'm sure it is something that does happen in the industry.
And I had said to you beforehand that I wanted to start the video off with an introduction and we just went straight on a tangent. And I take myself to blame for that because it's I love talking about whiskey, but you yourself, we call you the Irish legend here. For some of the people there are people that do tune in from the States that might not know you or the affiliation that you've had with Irish whiskey from the heyday. I mean, you're in it years. Explain maybe give yourself if you can, a brief kind of condensed introduction.
Yeah.
So people get to know you.
Okay. I've over 20 years experience working in the Irish whiskey industry. I started my career straight out of college. I had a degree in languages and politics essentially. And out of that I started working with Jameson. Makes sense. But no, I launched Jameson and the other Irish whiskey brands in Denmark.
Okay.
So I went over to Copenhagen straight out of college and spent a number of years over there. Firstly working just as a graduate ambassador, and then working for Pernod Ricard over there as a salesperson in Copenhagen itself. So that was a great experience. I came back to Ireland and started working for Irish distillers domestically here, just in sales. Then got out of the industry for a short period of time with a startup company called Cuisine de France, which was an Irish company that would par bake French rolls and breadsticks and baguettes and croissants and things like that.
They're in shops everywhere over in Ireland, yeah.
And I was involved with the establishment of their hospitality side of the business, so dealing with hotels and things like that. And through that, I met my wife. She was the marketing manager for the company, and I always said I was a lowly gutter slime sales rep down the country, and she was the blonde South Dublin marketing girl. And how we got together, I have no idea.
You sold yourself well, anyway.
Yeah. Well, married 12 years now, 13 years now. There's the mistake when you did it. 13 years.
We won't say that. They should watch your videos.
No, I had 3 kids later. It's all good. But then I got back into the industry and. A chance conversation with John Teeling, who obviously is the absolute icon, and some people refer to him as like the grandfather of the Irish whiskey industry. That some people even go so far as to say if it wasn't for John Teeling, there possibly wouldn't be an Irish whiskey industry as we know it today.
There was a lot of foresight back then for what he did, and I explain that in a number of videos that I do, and like being with Cooley and Great Northern now and all that kind of stuff. So
John, I met up with John and we had a conversation. He introduced me to his son Jack, who obviously has since founded Teeling Whisky Distillery. And John called me up about an hour later and he says, look, I don't know what your plans are, but I want you to work for me because I don't want you to work for any other whisky distillery. And I was like, okay. Right, so when do I start? He said, as soon as you can. So I went into him, I didn't have a role, he didn't have a role in mind. So I just went in general, helping out, and then within probably 2 weeks I took over the Irish market and I was responsible for all of Ireland and opened up a lot of new business for them, both in the Cooley industry Cooley business back then was really, there was a 3-prong approach to it. There was the branded business, which was the Quebec and Sir Conal's Connemara's. There was the private label business, which was liquid we'd make for a third party who would then go and sell it. And then there was just the bulk whiskey business as well, which was a huge part of Cooley. And part 2 and part 3, the bulk and the private label, financed part 1. So if we, for example, I start a business with Aldi and Lidl, once we start with that and we get paid for that because they will always pay you. You get that money that then is reinvested back into sending me over to the United States for 2 weeks to knock on doors and try to sell our branded business. So I worked with Cooley for a long period, both commercial side of it, and then morphed into more brand ambassadorial work role. Back in the days when there really weren't any. There was myself and John Quinn out of Tullamore Dew, and that was really it. You know, and then later on you had Seamus Lowry and you had a few others coming on, but back in the old days it was just the two Johns really doing Irish whiskey.
Well, I think it should be worth noting that for people that don't know, back in the day, you're talking, there wasn't many distilleries in Ireland.
There were 3 whiskey distilleries when I started with Cooley. And then soon afterwards, of course, we reopened Kilbegan, and that was 4 whiskey distilleries. And that was the way it was for a long period until Dingle were the next new distillery to open in kind of 2000 and
I think it was end of 13, start of 14, something like that.
So my career then continued with Cooley, and then when Cooley was purchased by Beam, Jim Beam, who at that stage were like the 7th largest drinks company in the world, I stayed with Beam. The Teelings exited the business and I stayed with Beam because essentially you have one of the biggest drinks companies in the world that just bought a quality Irish whiskey distillery, but they don't know anything about Irish whiskey, so I remained on to guide them in that regard and help them and do a lot of
an oversight role. I've seen
exactly.
operations and stuff like that.
And then I morphed then and started working for Scotch and all Beam products. Suntory took over Beam, and then you had Bowmore, you had Lafroig, you had Yamasaki, Hakshu, Hibiki, Canadian Club, Maker's Mark, Jim Beam, Glengarry, Auchintosh, and you keep going. I was responsible for all of those all over the world, and the Irish whiskies as well. So it was quite a busy period in my life.
I can imagine.
It was quite a lot of travel.
There's you have a lot of stuff on the table.
Yeah, there was a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
Absolutely.
So that was brilliant. And then stayed with Suntory, Beam Suntory for a number of years, and then last year I left Beam Suntory and went into just consultancy and doing independence of helping a lot of startup Irish whiskey distilleries, both in the blending side of the business, coming up with liquid development, but also just strategy, commercial strategy, as well as just marketing strategy and education. So started working here at Powerscourt back at the beginning of the summer, and loving it. I'm a Wicklow man, so I grew up 25 miles from here, just down the road.
Happy days.
And I say jokingly, it's a bit easier to come to the distillery here than go to head office in Osaka, It's
slightly.
Slightly. A little bit easier to get here. So no, I'm absolutely delighted. And then the other thing was as well, back working with Noel again, because we work well together. He, I believe, trusts my instincts when it comes to liquids, and then when we do events and we do talks together, I can kind of guide him a little bit. I know how to get information out of him.
More so teammates now at this stage than building a lifelong relationship with someone like that. Especially starting out and back in Cooley and where Noel came from. So
So look, it's been brilliant. So that's brought me up to date here. So now I'm back like 100% just focused on, I suppose, my one main love, which is of course Irish whiskey.
Sure.
And now I can relate to it, coming from the same county that I'm from, that there's a great story there to be built up. Not only, the beautiful surroundings and the location that we're in, Powerscourt Estate itself, but also just the history of whiskey making in County Wicklow. We've been looking into it. We can't find it.
Really?
Apart from illegal whiskey making. I don't know, some lads close living near to me I still can get some pudging from. But we can't actually pinpoint any major whiskey brands from County Wicklow.
Even from back in the 19th and 18th century?
It just didn't seem to be. Seemingly, it looks as if Dublin was such a focal point, that Wicklow was so close to Dublin that it didn't really require it. Now, most villages did have their breweries.
Sure.
And I know the village I grew up in, I still live in, County Rathdrum in County Wicklow, like this Brewery Lane, and obviously there was a brewery there. But all around County Wicklow, I can't think of anywhere with a distillery in the name at all. And I've looked into the papers and I've done a lot of research and we can't really find any. So, when Powerscourt release their own whiskey that's been made here, which is now 3 years and nearly 3.5 years old, it will be, certainly the first Wicklow-made whiskey in modern times, and maybe the first legal whiskey from County Wicklow in, I don't know.
Ever possible?
Possibly.
You'll have to have me up. We'll have to do a kind of a launch video or something like that to try it out.
We might do something like that. So
it's exciting,
Yeah. So look, it's very exciting here in Powerscourt at present. You can see the 3 stills were fully operational, have been for nearly 3.5 years now, producing a range of different whiskies, primarily single malt whiskey, but also we have been doing some pot still whiskey. The pot still whiskey has a lovely side story to it, that the barley, the non-malted barley, is from the estate here. So it's really, really local. All the rest of our malt we source from Quinn's of Baltinglass, out in the west part of County Wicklow. And then we've also done some peated malts here as well. We've done triple distillation, we've done double distillation.
Oh wow, you've really been working on kind of nailing down every aspect of it, hasn't you?
Yeah, essentially.
I didn't know you did peated either. Well, I suppose who would know?
Who would?
But that's
it's still only about a year old. So
interesting. That'd be nice.
And it's not as if I'm alien to peated whiskies, having worked with Connemara for so long, and then of course Lafroy, Bowmore, all those whiskies I've worked with. So, and the other beautiful thing about the distillery and from the stills there, it's all scalable. So if all of a sudden we realise we need significantly more output, well, that larger still, the 12,500 still, can fit into where the intermediate still is. The intermediate can become the new spirit still, and then we get a brand new large wash still. So everything is scalable, which I think is great foresight by Noel and the operations team who designed the distillery. So
I know Ryan and Alan were giving me kind of just a run through of the operation, and they mentioned that there's a lot of open space on the floor, and it is to be scalable in the future.
It is.
And I never asked the question. I didn't think of it until just now. But has anybody named the stills?
We don't have names on them now.
No,
they're just wash intermediate
spirits. All right, some people do. You have to ask the question.
Doggy dog. We just call them what they are. No, we haven't named those. No names on that. They're just distills. But the other thing that I always find amazing about when you come into, because having worked, for iconic brands in the past and very old distilleries, a purpose-built distillery. I mean, we talk about there's open space on it. Yeah. But from here, you can see everything. Yeah. You can see fermenting, you can see mashing, you can see distilling, and that's what's beautiful, I think, about purpose building a distillery from scratch.
You're not having to confine yourself to restraints.
Try to fit into different rooms and all types of things.
Retrofit and stuff like that, and dealing with licenses or whatever.
Been through it all in the past.
I can imagine. Long-standing history with Irish whiskey. But I did have a brief walk through it. It is an absolutely stunning distillery, and the grounds as well. Yeah. I mean, and I've said it, I'm not going to go into it too much, it won't bother, but I did say it in a couple of the other videos that I've done with the Fercullen on the Amarone and the 5 Elements, what accolades they've won for the houses and the gardens and stuff like that. What was a surprise to me, and I didn't realize this until I got here today, was that your maturation warehouses are on site. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
No, we're very fortunate in that regard, because this is an estate and this is a working farm as well. There was essentially a hay shed there that we could repurpose into a whiskey maturation site.
Brilliant.
A lot of the new distilleries in Ireland don't have that because they're not allowed for whatever planning reasons. Certainly, obviously, none of the distilleries in Dublin are allowed to have their maturation on site, but also just for different planning laws in different counties, they can't have the maturation.
Planning laws in Ireland are notoriously kind of difficult and very much unique to the county anyway.
Yes, very much so. So we're fortunate we have that. Yeah. Now we do need more than that, of course. So we do have some off-site maturation warehouses that we own as well. But all of our aged stock, all of our source stock is maturing over there. All of our unusual finishing is going on over there, and then of course all of the liquid that's been made today will be filled over the next few days over there as well into open barrels. Some of it will remain here, others will be shipped out to our other warehousing.
And as you're kind of talking about that, hopefully we'll see a couple of the videos that I've gotten of the distillery and some of the warehouse as well. It's a beautiful setup. It really is. Look, I mean, you're not going to go on and on about it, but love, any of the Fercullen whiskey that I've had on the channel, I've thoroughly enjoyed. Yeah, good. So I am really looking forward to trying this. And I think it's time now that we do. And I'm going to let you do the honors and pour it, because I tend to, when I'm pouring out stuff, I spill it everywhere.
Hopefully that's not
no
touching fate now, and I did the same.
It's not too early. We're good.
I have been pouring whiskies for over 20 years, so I should hope I can do it right.
Thank you very much.
There we go.
So when I spoke last time about the 18-year-old 5 Elements, there was, pardon what I'm going to say, the element of rum whiskey. Yeah. It's a rum cask used in that, correct?
Yes.
For the life of me now, I know there was bourbon as well, which I think there was only 4 different casks.
The 18-year-old had rum, it had Bordeaux red wine, ruby port, and all of that with bourbon barrel maturation as well, 18 years of age.
So this is the same, would say, blank canvas as the 18-year-old. So the 18-year-old single malt bourbon.
Yes.
20-year-old single malt bourbon, and then the finishing then afterwards.
Exactly.
So we have 5 casks
Yes.
for this one.
Yes.
Break it
5
down.
styles.
5 styles.
5 styles. So
You've already partly said it, but just for
Yeah.
the sake of, I like to repeat myself a thousand times.
So the Blanc Canvas is 20-year-old bourbon matured, all Ike's bourbon matured single malt whiskey. Then the 4 other cask styles are 16-year-old liquid that was filled into finishing casks and allowed to finish for further 4 years, bringing them up to 20 years of age. So they were Muscatel, Marsala, Pedro Ximénez, and Oloroso Sherry.
Right.
So 2 of which would be more common in the landscape of Irish whiskey, that being, of course, Oloroso Sherry and Pedro Ximénez.
Yeah.
Marsala and Muscatel, different distilleries have done some finishes with those
Yeah.
products.
They're coming a little bit more kind of popular in
Yeah.
terms of like sweet fortified wine finishes and stuff like that.
Exactly.
You're seeing a lot more of them, but not as much as would say the Oloroso and the PX.
No.
Just
And one of the last brands that I did for Beam Suntory was the Tyrconnell 16, which was a Oloroso Muscatel
Muscatel,
finish.
two, yeah.
Finishes in that one.
Beautiful
So
whiskey.
yeah, no, I'm quite proud of that one.
Is that your stamp on that?
That's my
Brilliant.
stamp on that and some of the previous ones.
Great. And everybody always talks about value for money. It's a phenomenal whiskey,
Yeah.
and, you know, flavor profile.
Yeah.
Otherwise. But anyway, I digress. We're getting away from it. But so the 5 casks, it's 16 years maturation and then 4 years finishing in each of those casks,
Exactly.
and then vatted and blended.
Exactly, with 20-year-olds, with the 20-year-old bourbon.
Oh, so that's an extra element brought in as
Yes.
well. Okay, happy now. I understand. Right. So
This, I think, certainly
wow.
nosing. One of the things that I get from the nose straight away is you get the bourbon influence straight away. You get some of that vanilla going on, but then you got a lovely floral, which I always think comes from like Marsala. And there is also a touch of the musty nature of like walking into an old wine warehouse or a wine cellar. There's a mustiness there, which I always find comes from Oloroso.
Yeah.
And then there's a syrupy nature. It sounds funny, but you smell it, you can smell almost a viscosity coming through it on the nose.
Yeah, it's very dense.
Yeah.
It's very heavy, and
Yeah.
you do get the kind of syrupy nature of it too. I'm guessing that's the PX.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I know.
yeah, because I have noticed a few PX different whiskies as of lately. When done right, it stands out.
Yeah,
it does give it that very
Yeah.
kind of. I want to say it like a maple syrup, where you open a thing of maple syrup and you get that syrupy smell.
Yeah.
Very similar to that.
Yeah, it is. So all those different elements, I mean, are there on the nose, really.
Yeah.
You know.
It's beautiful. What I remember about the 18-year-old, and I use it as a comparison, I suppose, because you know you are going off the 5 elements thing. So I suppose it is the second rendition in that kind of series of such, not without it actually being a series. I remember it being very, very vibrant, very tropical, with not a whole lot of spice on the nose and the palate, but just very well balanced.
Yeah.
Whereas this one is a little bit more kind of, obviously it's older, but with that you're getting a lot more refined. And I know there are different finishes gone into it.
Yes.
But it seems kind of a little bit more, more of a gentleman of whiskey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, some of its parts, so to
Yeah.
speak. It's interesting to say the 18, you had a bit more of the exotic. One of the things about that particular single malt whiskey, in its younger days, in its kind of 8 to maybe 14, it tends to be quite vibrant green fruits, pears, apples. These are some of the DNA everyone talks about coolie single malts.
Yeah,
you know?
and
when that gets to mid-teens, 15, 16, 17, 18, it starts switching over slightly and it becomes slightly more exotic. You get more, I often equate it to as a child growing up and going visiting my granny, and for dessert you might get one of the old fruit cocktail tins, and you open it up and there was pear and it was peach and there was cherry. If you like cherry, you always went for that. Everyone hated the pear because it was always rock hard and the peach was always delicious, but that wasn't what you wanted out of that can. What you wanted was a syrup. You wanted that sweet syrup at the bottom, and every child would fight over who got to sip the can. And that's what's happening when you get to this older, later teen age in these coolie malts. It's just the reaction, because generally they're all bourbon barrel matured, and it's the reaction of the wood and the vanillins in the wood reacting, the esters in the alcohol in the whiskey, and those green fruits changing and turning into exotic fruits. So it's interesting you mentioned that with the 18, because that's what you would expect with that type of bourbon barrel matured. Now, of course, with that one you had the rum, you had the wine.
There's a lot more elements
coming
thrown into
in.
it.
Whereas with this one, there is that exotic nature, but you've got the influence of the other elements coming into play as well, to use the name of the whiskey, 5 elements.
Certainly, you can really pick it out too.
Oh, you can, and that's what I think is
very obvious.
Is fascinating about this whiskey.
But nothing overdone. Everything is kind of
everything
really,
has to be just there, subtle enough to make a difference, but not enough of a difference to change the ultimate flavour of the whiskey.
What ABV are we at in this one?
This one is 46.
Okay, so it's the same as the same as the last one.
Same as the last.
But it's not the same as your 18-year-old single malt, which is 43.
That's 43. Yeah, exactly.
So we have a little sip?
And you know, some of the things Noel gets asked, well, why did you bottle of that? And he says, because I liked it at that.
A lot of people would argue that 46% is the kind of nice biting point for Irish whiskey.
Yeah, you still got a lot of the oils and the texture and the viscosity and all of that. But yeah, hey, it's tasty.
Sláinte. It's quite heavy, isn't it? It's quite dense.
There's a real, again, that word viscosity. There's that real oiliness in your mouth, surrounding everywhere. But I think initially you get a lot of the vibrant fruity nature from the Muscatel and the Marsala coming through. You then have that oiliness, that syrupy nature really is some of the PX. Then now, because we both tasted around the same time, your mouth is completely salivating. It's drying, spice dry, but salivating as well. And you've got that tannic nature that you often get with Oloroso. Like sometimes I describe it, you know, a really heavily Oloroso sherried whiskey is like licking the back of a leather belt.
Yeah, there is that element of it certainly at the back of the tongue. The tongue is just completely covered.
Oh yeah, covered, and the oil is still there.
Yeah.
The oils haven't dissipated. The oils are still coating your tongue, and really lovely warmth and really long finish. Very, very sweet summer fruit.
Yeah.
Rich red fruit finish going on.
Quite complex.
Yeah. Oh, very complex.
Yeah, evolving a lot now. Even you know, still like there's still a little bit of that hint of the warmth on the tongue. Yeah. Only now the kind of oils are starting to dissipate a little bit more.
Yeah. No, it's and it's a sum of its parts. You know, all those elements you can pinpoint where they're kicking in, where those flavors are coming from, and relate it back to what went into this whiskey. You know, and that's what I think is really special about a whiskey like this. It's one that you know you will sit down and savor. It's one that you will. It's
a special occasion. It's not one of those ones you kind of drink on a Wednesday night unless you're me. Mm-hmm. That's just bored and it's like I want something nice because it's Wednesday.
You met your brother here.
It's like, what will I do tonight? I'll drink a nice whiskey.
I will.
Beautiful.
And then cry a few weeks later
when it's gone.
When you realise what you opened.
A little bit of dark chocolate as well, kind of on the palate, kind of mixing with that, as you said, like leather. Yeah. Very nice. Very nice.
You will often get dark chocolate coming through. Again, it's one of those typical flavour profiles from sort of, I found liquids that are bourbon and Oloroso. You do get a sort of dark chocolatey type aroma.
Notice that a little bit myself now as well. But in terms, I don't know, do you know off the top of your head price point?
It's 220.
220.
Yeah.
A little bit more than what was the 18? I think was 180.
Yeah. It's a little bit more. It is.
But it's in or around the kind of
where you expect 20-year-old whiskies to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Nowadays.
And you know, beautiful packaging, great bottle, brilliant liquid. You know, master's touch. Someone like Noel Sweeney has.
And it embodies the name Noel Sweeney, and he did distill this.
Yeah, he did distill it.
You know, I wanted to make that point earlier that there are some distilleries that weren't able to, they weren't up and running at the time, so their master distiller took over a distillery. Yeah. Whereas Noel, when Noel distilled it, brought it with him.
Exactly. And then went out and sourced the different barrels to you know, that palate in order to paint this masterpiece, essentially.
Are you able to tell us by any chance where the casks came from?
They weren't specific to particular bodegas.
Okay. Okay.
Noel would use a few different cooperages where he would source things from.
Source things over the years.
So we have partnerships with cooperages and brokers rather than with specific bodegas. Now that's something we're looking at maybe doing for some special releases in some of our international markets where we might source some barrels from their contacts, and then you know that'll be available in those markets. But for our general releases, now we're using brokers and cooperages.
That's another thing that I wanted to mention with Fercullen is that when they do releases, generally speaking, they tend to do them right, but they're not full on. There's not a release every couple of months or anything like that. You know, we see that across the board with some of the Irish distilleries. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's very premium when it comes out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything about it, you've took a quick tour around when people are seeing the images. Every touch point here is premium. From the moment you come in the estate, it's a premium estate. It's the third best garden in the world, you know. Everything in here is premium, so our whiskey has to be as well. And no, we're not looking to just get the PR hit of having a release this week, next week, the following week, because let's face facts, that's going to annoy people as well. So we're not into that. We will release something when we're ready, or more importantly, when it is ready. And the liquid is ready and we can stand over it and it stands for everything that we are about, which is premium. Then you'll see it in a bottle, then you'll see it on a shelf, and then I'd suggest you pick up a bottle.
Pick up a bottle and drink it and try it and make sure. And I'll leave all the links down below, of course, to the Powerscourt Distillery, the Fercullen brand of whiskies. They have their own kind of branch off the website where they go through all the whiskies. This is definitely on it because I've seen it there. Still available. 220-ish, roughly, depending on stockists. And certainly one hell of a dram. Definitely one you would kind of, it's not one you would reach for every night of the week, as we said there, jokingly, but you would kind of, it is a special occasion whiskey. It does have that kind of essence to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, try telling that to my wife. She's running through this like there's no tomorrow.
Does your wife drink whiskey?
Oh, loves whiskey.
Oh my God, I tried so many times to get my better half at home, and I say that on camera. To try and whiskey, and it breaks my heart because I'd say to her, "What do you think of that?" And she goes, "Nail varnish." I just think, oh my God! You know, when you're into it so much, so that's a that's nice to have. It's nice to be able to do that.
And I sense check her, I have to say, because when I would write a lot of tasting notes for Powerscourt and for different people as well, and I will always sense check her and see what she thinks. Have I written? Is that just pure BS? And if she can pinpoint some of the things that I've written in it, well then I'm going down the right path, you know. So no, I trust her taste, and unfortunately she doesn't realise that she's spoiled. She doesn't realise that it's not really that unusual, that it is unusual to have like 18, 20, 25-year-old whiskies in your house the whole time.
Lucky lady. Try getting that at the current standpoint in my house. No, it's just not happening. We're going for value in there. But. So one last question before we finish it up. Do you foresee this kind of, I suppose it is kind of a series now at this stage?
It is a series, yes.
Will it? Do you foresee it continuing on? Now I'm not looking for.
No, I definitely foresee this continuing on. When we're going to have a next release of it, time will tell. But it is part of a series. I think we've hit something. We've hit a bit of a zeitgeist with this one, getting those different elements together. The name is perfect. The elements can refer to so many different things, but for me, the elements are the elements of flavour that make up this whiskey. And I think if we can continue that, it doesn't necessarily have to be 5 different flavour profiles every time.
Obviously not. No.
But I think as a concept, it's great. And certainly it's something that we can play with, and maybe let's see how things mature, how things finish, or maybe even we try new things and bring it out. I'm not saying it's always going to be double digit, but we'd like to hope maybe that's where we can aspire to be. But certainly it's part of an ongoing series. But whether it'll be annual, more than likely not. But something to look out for. So the series isn't finished yet.
Brilliant. Well, there you have it now. So you heard it here first on Whiskey and Whiskey that there might be more in the pipeline. Definitely not finished yet. But listen, John, I want to thank you very much for your time. I understand, how difficult it can be to kind of nail down these things these days, and take a half an hour. What was meant to be kind of condensed, we ran on a bit. But that's what happens when you talk about great whiskey and a bit of Irish history legendary, or Irish whiskey legendary. So appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Just a shout out to the lads here behind. You can't see them off camera, standing there holding each other's hands. Ryan and Alan, thank you very much for having me down here today. Appreciate it. Sláinte, beautiful whiskey. Be sure you check out all the links below.
Cheers.
Cheers. All the best.